Father God, the almighty creator of all that we see and know, including us, we're asking your guiding hand upon tonight that your name be praised by what is done and said tonight, so that you receive the glory and we get to know the candidates know us. Again, we're thankful that we live in a country that we can still do it. We can still get together and debate about important things that need to happen. And we're asking for wisdom and understanding and knowledge that comes from above and the Almighty. It's in the name of Jesus we give thanks and pray. Amen.
Amen.
I pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
So I'd like to introduce the candidates tonight. We've got three very qualified people running for the Secretary of State on the Republican ticket. Scott Schwab and Pete Esau are both legislators currently, and they're both from Johnson County. Craig McCullough has worked with the Secretary of State in the office and has recently quit to run for office, I understand. And he's from Topeka. And after that, I'm just going to go sit down and let Lynn McAllister, who has agreed to be the MC tonight, take over. Thank you, Lynn.
They call me a moderator.
Well, all right.
It's good. We thank you for coming again so that we know you and you can become acquainted with us. There are some questions that we have as a committeeman in the county of Lyon. And we have the opportunity, you in the audience, to ask questions too. We ask that you would we're going to pass the 3x5 cards around and pass them to the end of the row. And we'll, if we get enough time at the end, we'll get as many of those answered as we can. I don't know whether you all know the format, but the format would be, right now, I'm to ask that everybody turn off their cell phone. So we don't have any interruptions that way. We've asked the candidates to introduce themselves and what they bring when they come as a Secretary of State, what they would bring to that position, and any of that kind of background information that would be pertinent to what they're running for as Secretary of State. They have 5 minutes to do so. And so we'll go in that. We have some questions to start the round, and then any from the audience that we can get to, we'll finish up with that one.
Is there anyone in the audience that would like to have a 3x5 card to write down any questions at this time? If you do want one, just raise your hand and we'll deliver it to you anytime during that.
Yeah, if it happens during the round here, like, feel free to pass one along. So, did you flip a card, or flip a coin, who's going first? Or do we just go in this order
left to
here?
right if you like.
Okay, you want to start right down there?
They see it,
You can do whatever you like.
Thank you. Well, yeah, again, my name
Can I
is...
interrupt you before you start? No. This is my wife. She's going to be our timer. I forgot to announce that. So we're going to try to, this is a 5-minute deal, and then the rest of the questions will be, try to hold it 3 minutes. And she'll give you little signals. Is that good?
30 seconds and then I'll pay
I'm sorry.
No problem, we're good. Everyone's good? All right. Again, my name is Craig McCullough. I'm a candidate for Kansas Secretary of State. I'm running for this office because I believe we need a professional and conservative public administrator to run the office over the course of the next 4 years. So a little bit about me. I'm from Shawnee County. I was born, raised there in North Topeka. I lived there with my wife. My wife and I met in the 1st grade. It took 20 years for me to get up the nerve to ask her out, but once I did, she said yes, and we've been together ever since. After high school, my wife had started a family, and I went off and joined the military, and that didn't work out. So when we got together, I inherited 2 great stepkids, Gavin, he's 11, and Riley, she is 8. And then my wife and I, surprise, we had twins. So I literally went 0 to 4 children overnight. Twins are 5 now, Crosby and Allie, but it's great. I come from a big family, and I've really enjoyed, you know, also getting to have one large family. So, you know, the majority of my career has been in the military. In 2001, I enlisted in the United States Army. I got to participate in the invasion of Iraq in 2003. After that deployment, I went to KU on the GI Bill, and the Army decided to send me back, and I went to Africa. After that, Afghanistan, and most recently, I just returned from Ukraine in December, where I trained Ukrainian military members that are currently in a conflict with Russian separatists. You know, in between those deployments, I've started a small business. When I was 25, I decided I'd open up a small martini bar in Topeka, and that has since grown into a portfolio of multifamily housing units in Topeka. So, you know, I have 3 main goals for this office. I've worked there as the Deputy Assistant Secretary of State for the last couple of years, and there are some things that we need to get caught up on inside the office, and things that maybe haven't been the top priority. I think that they should be. First and foremost, I want to lower business filing fees. The Secretary of State's office is a fee-funded state agency. In Kansas, we don't have high filing fees, but every year we give back $8 to $10 million to the state general fund for these guys to spend it. Last year we gave back $11 million. We're charging too much for the services, so I believe we should return those to the small businesses and others who pay those fees. Second priority would be to increase or improve the Kansas Business Center. You know, I mentioned a small bar that I opened when, you know, in Topeka, you didn't have to sell food to sell alcohol. Well, so I didn't have to have a license for food. Well, a couple months later, I go to open up the kitchen, and lo and behold, the food inspector says, "Craig, you're supposed to have a food license." I'm like, "No, here's the law, right?" And he said, "Well, no, you are putting a garnish on the drink, so therefore you need to have a food license." Okay? It's not that I wasn't trying to comply. It's that I didn't know. So what I did at the Secretary of State's office is I built a business form finder that brings all the different forms across state government together into one easy-to-find location, all right, according to business type. Last week, we found out that we were awarded the International Association of Commercial Administrators Merit Award. This is a big deal. It's a first of its kind in the nation, and I want to continue to improve upon this. The third thing I want to do is I want to increase citizen access to information, specifically when it comes to voting. In 2016, I became the first voter fraud investigator in the history of the state of Kansas, and what I learned going out investigating voter fraud was that a lot of people just don't know. We need to do a better job at the Secretary of State's office of promoting the information, of making sure all of the counties are on the same page, and making sure that individual poll workers are properly trained so that everyone who is eligible to vote gets their vote cast and counted. So again, I'm looking forward to this evening. I'm very thankful that you're having us here tonight, and hopefully you guys got some good questions for me. So, thank you.
That's right on time.
My name is Keith Esau. I think a few of you have met me a couple of times before. So I've come to a couple of other events here in Florida. I grew up in a small town named Buhler. It's not too far from here, next to Hutchinson. I went to Tabor College in Hillsborough, Kansas, and got a music degree, and went to work in a computer store during the summer, and the Macintosh computer came out. And I said, you know, here is an opportunity to work with cutting edge technology. I taught myself how to program, bought a development system, started my own business, and wrote programs for the Macintosh computer. A few years later, a company up in Lenexa was looking for a Macintosh programmer, and they bought out my company. I moved up to Olathe, Kansas, right next door, and for the last 35 years, I've been working on spreadsheet software, working on the software of the spreadsheet, not creating spreadsheets, but the software that manipulates the spreadsheets. The software I work with dealt with millions of records, analyzing data for silicon wafer manufacturers, for banking industry and other industries. So I learned a lot about how to get data efficiently and work with it and make it work well. Around 1992, I was getting a little frustrated with the way that things were going in Washington. I said, you know, I really can't complain if I'm not trying to do something to change the way things are happening. So I started out helping my local state rep block precincts, and then I got involved in recruiting precinct people all across Johnson County and a few across the rest of the state. Got involved with several big projects for recruiting precinct people. Got elected as a precinct person myself, and then got elected to be on the state committee for 4 years, and then elected as the 3rd district chair for the state, for this party for 4 years after that. I got to serve on the rules committee when we did our first presidential caucus, and worked with people to develop the rules for Kansas to do its first presidential caucus in more than 20 years. I say all that because when I look at the Secretary of State's office, I can bring both my computer skills and my working with grassroots people into that office. You know, we look at the Secretary of State's office, it's not the paper pushing office we used to think of. It's not keeping records in file cabinets anymore. It's a vital technology platform. We're keeping records on computers. And we have people across the world that are trying to hack into computer systems all over the place. I want to bring my technology experience, as well as my legislative experience and my grassroots experience, all to the Secretary of State's office to make sure that our records are kept safe, that we make things easy to use for our citizens out there, and that we serve the public in the best way that we can. With that, I ask that you vote for me on August 7th and work with us to get lots of Republicans elected in November.
We're ready if you're there.
They're not here yet, they're not in case.
My name's Scott Schwab. I actually grew up in Great Bend, but I lived here for almost a year. I lived off Middle Ark Lane and went to Village Elementary. Mrs. Barr was my 4th grade teacher for a semester. And my sister babysat somebody that lived there. They had twins 2 doors down from us. We moved to Great Bend later, and we found out 2 months after we moved that Lorna Anderson killed the father of those twins, Martin Anderson. They were the neighbors my sister babysat. And I still, I was young back then, and I still process that. But my dad worked for Hopkins Manufacturing here, and then got a job with Fort Rush down in Great Bend and grew up there. Graduated from Fort Hays State, got a job with Kansas Farm Bureau, moved to Wyandotte County, and then met a really beautiful girl out of Olathe. And put her through pharmacy school at the University of Kansas. She got her doctorate in pharmacy. And when she got done, I took my LSAT. I was going to go to law school, but she said, why don't you run for office? And then when you're done running for office, you go back to law school. And 16 years later in Fort Worth, I'm just probably not going back to law school. But that being said, you know, as much as I would have liked to move back to either Great Bend or Lyon, my wife will not move anywhere where there's not a Target within 2 miles. So I married a suburbanite, but that being said, I understand Central Kansas, Southeast Kansas, they having a lot of time here. But all that being said, I got first elected in 2002, got sworn in 2003, and I've been Vice Chair of Commerce and Labor. I've been on Appropriations, been Vice Chair of Tax, I've been Vice Chair of Ethics and Elections. I was Chair of it for 4 years. And now I'm Speaker Pro Tem of Kansas House. I was also Chair of Insurance and Financial Institutions. And there just comes a point where you're like, I think I'm kind of done in the Kansas House. I've done what I could do. To which my wife said, well, do you want to go back to law school? Well, what do you want to do? I said, you know, with Chris running off for governor, I think I'm running for Secretary of State. And here's the reason why, is legislative intent. We passed a voter ID law, we passed a lot of election law, but we have 105 county clerks that don't know what the legislature was trying to tell them to do. And most of that legislation was bipartisan effort. So, we've got voter ID, we've got proof of citizenship. We moved the spring elections in the fall, we widened that primary between the local election in August and in November, so there's more time to process between the primary and November election. And so what our message is, it's just time to breathe. That's a lot of change in a local clerk. As a matter of fact, we visited this afternoon with Mrs. Vopot here in, Timmy Vopot here in your county, Lyon County. And by the way, you're getting some great voting machines that your county's invested in, that you have a paper ballot, which their system that they've in place here today is just fantastic. May 14th, they're going to kind of showcase some of that on the fairground. I suggest you go out there and take a look at that because they're really doing a good job. But all that being said, is there's been all this pressure on our county clerks, and what we want to do is say, okay, let's come back in and let you know what the legislature wants to do. So whether it's Morton County or Leavenworth County, Cherokee or Comanche or Miami or Wyandotte or whatever county you got across to the 105, you understand the law the same way and you execute the law the same way and run at a high standard. That's actually a small portion of the office of Secretary of State. The other thing we want to do is it relates to business filings. We've created a nonprofit in the name of one of our kids. And before I could get the nonprofit status from the IRS, I had to file Secretary of State's office. Well, what do I do if I'm a roofer? I go to the Department of Labor, get my unemployment insurance. I re-key everything I just keyed into the Secretary of State's office. If I'm a restaurant, I now got to go to the Department of Ag and re-key everything again. So what we want to do is just your traditional online profile. You create a sign-on in a profile. As you go from silo to silo to silo throughout government, you're able to tap that server out of the Secretary of State's office to pre-populate. Just make it easy to do business in the state of Kansas. Eventually what you do, once that system's built out, is you allow the counties and the cities to build in. Hey, you got a permit you got to do because you want to do some modifications on a building downtown Main Street? Well, tap into our system and we'll pre-populate it so those businesses, it's easy to get the permit. Eventually you drive that security into Topeka, Kansas, where you have a choke point in Topeka, Kansas, which is harder to hack. Because if you can hack Equifax, I guarantee you can hack Cherokee County. But we're not going to mandate it on counties, it's just going to be an ease of use. And we start following that. The state of Kansas just awarded Unisys a new contract to start working with our security systems, updating our day-to-day servers. And what we want to do is say, okay, let's start where the people of Kansas start. And they don't start with KDH&E, they start with Secretary of State's office. And it's just, literally, we just want to be the secretary for the state of Kansas. That's it. Thanks so much.
Yes, that brings us to the next. Do you have some
Yeah,
questions?
if you guys want to pass your cards, ask me a question.
Have some, if you do have questions already, then we'll probably have some more as we go along. All right. Reviewing some of the questions that came to me, one of them, there were three questions that lumped into one. This is for all of you to address. So we just go in the same order as we did before, okay? The question one being, and I'm gonna lead you through about three ones, and we wanna cover some of these points. Do you believe that Kansas has been going in the right direction regarding the prosecution of voter fraud, and will you continue to go down that path? This one kind of goes along with it. The 2011, Kansas passed the Secure and Fair Elections Law, also known as the SAFE Act, which requires legitimate personal identification to register to vote. This law was challenged by the Kansas League of Women Voters, who are represented by the ACLU. Currently, the judge in this case is still deliberating the outcome. What outcome do you believe is appropriate and why? So that would be one of the questions, and here it kind of links into it. You can address it as you go, are there statewide systems in place to check, one, multiple voting within a county or state, two, multiple registries, three, keep voter rolls updated for such things as deaths and moves, and four, adequate cyber security? Do I need to repeat any of that? That's a lot in one question, but basically what we're wanting to know, do you believe that Kansas is going the right direction regarding the prosecution of voter fraud, and will you continue to go down that path, and what do you know about it, and what do we need to do?
All right, so far we have prosecuted, I believe, about 13 individuals. We've dismissed one case. And yes, the legislature, they passed the law. It's our job to uphold it, okay? I fully believe that the investigative portion of that belongs in our office because we have the systems in place to really check that, okay? We have the voter registration database centralized in our office. However, right now in the office, we have a veteran prosecutor. We're not always going to have that. And I don't want to push those prosecutions down at the county level because, frankly, they've got enough on their plate. What I would like to do is establish a partnership with the Attorney General. I look at some of the voter fraud that I've investigated, and some of it, not all of it, is like when you miss the stop sign or the speed limit, all right? It's an oops, and we slap you with a stupid tax, and you learn from it, and you go on down the road. But to not prosecute these individuals, I think would be the wrong fit. I might need help with the last two paragraphs of that question. We talked about one of the questions revolved around systems in place. Right now, Kansas has what we call the ELVA system. We get it through a private vendor called ES&S. And to where all that stuff is in one central location, all right? Where we have the majority of the problems is on the Kansas-Colorado border, because Colorado has all mail-in ballots. We also have problems on the KC metro area, okay? I have individuals who own land in both Kansas and Colorado who thought they can vote in both places. Well, hey, you're wrong, okay? I'm not sure if you guys remember signing the poll book affidavit, but there's a little affidavit there that says you will not vote and haven't voted, again, another election. Well, it's kind of like reading the fine print on a credit card bill, all right? We need to make sure that people understand that they cannot vote in two states. I've also investigated individuals who have jumped across the line in Kansas City, who every time their insurance expires, they go get a license in a different state and register to vote due to the motor voter law, okay? Those guys, it's easy to catch, and I think that was Secretary Kobach's intent, was to make it easy to vote but hard to cheat, and I believe you guys secured that. So, did I answer all the
I
questions?
think so, only the outcome of what's being legislated.
Yes. All right, so the proof of citizenship law, the problem with this law was not that, the intent of the law to make sure all citizens, only citizens vote. That was already the law, okay? We just wanted to make sure we had a stopgap at the front door. The problem with this law, however, was the administration of the law, okay? Anytime the county election officers and the DMVs aren't on the same page when it comes to voter registration, you create disparities in the law, all right? So if we tell you that you got to provide proof of citizenship, but the DMV doesn't, and you register to vote, you think your registration's finished. Well, guess what? It wasn't. And that's what got the office in trouble, was that right there. We had a conflict of interest between the state law and the motor voter law.